Hello BookTube, my name is Michelle and welcome to Challenge Thy Shelf. Today I wanted to do a video for you guys wrapping up my nonfiction November, which I know is horrendously late as it is the middle of December, but that's just kind of how I roll. I read 3.5 books for nonfiction November and just want to talk to you guys a little bit about them. The first book I read was Fear and Clothing, Unbuckling American Style by Cintra Wilson. The author embarked on a 3-year journey across the United States to unpack personal style and what that says about an individual, their personal politics, their culture, religion, etc. What I found really fascinating about this book was her journey through the southern United States, and particularly her time at the Kentucky Derby, which, if you didn't know, I didn't know, the Kentucky Derby sort of functions on this caste system where you can tell a lot about a person and their status based on the size of their hats and also their proximity to the racetrack. Also, she went to game day at Ole Miss, and the outfits that are chosen for game day are very specific, very highly curated, and serve a higher purpose that is hilariously regressive and completely odd. I know this seems like a shallow topic to write about, and perhaps in the hands of a less capable author it would have been. However, I think Cintra Wilson infuses a lot of depth and complexity to the subject matter, and also just has this very sharp, biting sort of punk wit that is very unique to the author. I think what really set this book over the top as a 5-star read for me was the originality of the content. It was very astute, it was very humorous, and I would highly recommend it to anybody who's interested in the subject matter. The second book I read for nonfiction November was Regarding the Pain of Others by Susan Sontag. In this very brief text, the author puts together a really thoughtful meditation on how we consume images of pain, suffering, and violence. She asks us to really examine what the emotional and psychological consequences are when we consume images of pain and suffering, not only through television, but also photography, paintings, religious iconography. She challenges the reader to think about our own relationship with these and what these images do for us. Do they incite empathy? Are they a call to action? Or are we just odd voyeurs of pain and suffering? I also really like that she includes the side of the image makers, and specifically conflict photographers and war photographers, what the psychological emotional consequences are for them, as well as the ethical burdens that they encounter being in these places, taking photographs, and not necessarily intervening on behalf of their subjects. I like also that she asks us to consider our relationships with these conflicts and how they would change if we didn't have documentation of them. What would our perspective of World War II be if there weren't people like Robert Capa photographing the beaches of Normandy? What would our relationship to Vietnam be if there weren't people like Eddie Adams making images like Saigon Execution? What would our relationship to Rwanda be had we not had documentation by James Notway of the horrendous and hellish genocide that was taking place there? In a time when we're berated with images, it's really refreshing to encounter a text that asks us to assess our relationship to those images. This was very much a 5-star read for me. I think for anybody who's interested in picking up texts that aren't super lengthy, but things that will really pack a punch, Susan Sontag's writings are highly, highly recommended. I think if you pick up any of her writings, you will not be disappointed. The third book that I picked up for nonfiction November is The Youngest Science by Lewis Thomas. Now, this is his autobiography accounting his time growing up in a medical household to the time that he practiced and eventually retired as a physician. He notes the various changes in medicine over time, not just in our technological advancements and understanding of the science of medicine, but also the changes that have occurred when it comes to vetting and selecting future practitioners of medicine. I particularly was drawn to the sections where he talked about his time practicing medicine in the Korean War and what that was like trying to conduct research in the midst of a war zone. Overall, Thomas manages to compress a very accomplished and very fruitful life into a very small, readable book. Now, this was a 5-star read for me. However, I think if you want to cultivate a love for Lewis Thomas, I would have to recommend 2 other books. I would recommend The Lives of a Cell, Notes of a Biology Watcher, and then the follow-up to that called The Medusa and the Snail. This was a series of short essays that were published originally for the New England Journal of Medicine and were so good and so popular that Joyce Carol Oates encouraged him to have them published in a series of books. So each of these contains about 29 essays, and they are science and biology related, but just many of his musings on life as well. And he manages to marry these in such a beautiful, digestible, accessible way that I have no choice but to highly, highly recommend these to people. And also, as a point of interest, Lives of a Cell won the National Book Award in 1974, and he won in 2 categories for arts and letters and the sciences. So very well endorsed pair of essays here. The 4th book I picked up for Nonfiction November is NeuroTribes, The Legacy of Autism and the Future of Neurodiversity by Steve Silberman. Now, this book, I'm not quite finished with it, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but it basically does what it says, and it's a history of autism and Asperger's and how we're sort of behind the curve in understanding much of it because of the research that was lost when it was first being conducted. Now, the other 2 books that I'll probably finish during the month of December, but you'll definitely be hearing more about are Left in Dark Times by Bernard-Henri Levy and Sex at Dawn by Christopher Ryan and Cecilia Jetha. Now, I think this book in particular was making the rounds on BookTube maybe 1 or 2 years ago. This discusses monogamy and how this may not necessarily be the most natural thing to our species. It discusses a lot of anthropology and biology to support that thesis. And then Left in Dark Times was penned in 2008 and is sort of a meditation and discussion on progressive leftism in the West. And I'm very excited to read this because I'm interested if any of these predictions have come true. You'll hear more about these when I get to them in December or January. Now, as a personal challenge, I have set out for the month of December to make my TBR my book of the month books that I have not gotten to. So I've got those to talk to you guys about. The book that I'm reading as a buddy read and as a book club read for work is Who Fears Death by Nnedi Okorafor. I'm about 120 pages into this and really, really enjoying it. And I will talk to you guys more about that in my December wrap-up. I have The Rules of Magic by Alice Hoffman. This is a follow-up to Practical Magic. This is the story of the ants when they were young. So I have already finished this book and really liked it, and we'll talk about it more in my December wrap-up. I also have Marlena by Julie Buntin. This book has been making its way around BookTube. I know that Eric Carl Anderson and Matthew Sciarappa have already done a buddy read of this. And I'm not sure about Eric's channel, but I know that Matthew has a review of this on his channel, which I will link below if anybody's interested. I haven't watched it yet because I'm interested to see, once I finish it, if we have some similar differing opinions, but I'll definitely let you guys know when I finish. The 3rd book that I have is Beasts of Extraordinary Circumstance by Ruth Emmie Lang. This is a debut novel by the author, and it was a book of the month exclusive for the month of October. So I am absolutely looking forward to reading this book, and again, we'll let you guys know more about it. And the 4th book that I have on that pile is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to review it. This has been reviewed to death on BookTube, so I will just leave it at that. Just count me as one of the people who will have read this by the end of the year. So that's all I have for you guys for today. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and please let me know if you love any of these books, if you hate any of these books, if you've read any of these books, and please feel free to share down in the comments. Until next time, have a great day. Bye.